Alex, I walked into the shop this morning and caught the scent of the coal forge cooling down from last night. It's that heavy, sulfurous perfume that settles right into your marrow. It reminded me of the first time I tried to move steel. I had this grand vision of being some medieval wizard, but I mostly just succeeded in making a very expensive, very hot pretzel that didn't fit anything.
A pretzel? I've seen your early work, Tiger. It looked more like a piece of iron that had a very long, very losing argument with a locomotive.
Fair point. I was hitting it like I was trying to punish the metal for existing instead of dancing with it. But that's the thing about the modern maker movement. Everyone sees these high-speed power hammers on TV that can flatten a Buick in 4 seconds, and they forget that the real magic happens when it's just you, a heavy piece of cast steel, and a hand hammer that feels like an extension of your own arm.
It's definitely having a moment, though. I feel like every time I open a browser, there's another beginner's guide to smithing or a video of someone making a Viking axe out of a rusty leaf spring. But for someone sitting at home with a garage and a dream, where does the romance end and the actual physics begin?
It begins with the realization that you're about to become a very sweaty, very soot-covered conductor of a heat-based orchestra. Everyone wants the hydraulic press and the laser-guided induction heater right out of the gate. But honestly, if you can't manage a solid fuel fire, real coal or coke, you're missing the heartbeat of the craft. There's a specific language to a coal fire. It whispers to you when it's hungry, it hisses when it's angry, and it glows that perfect butter yellow when it's ready to turn a rigid bar of steel into something that acts like Play-Doh.
Okay, but let's talk practicalities. I'm the audience here. I don't have an industrial permit or a medieval castle. If I want to set this up in my backyard without the neighbors calling the fire department, what am I actually looking at?
You start with the Holy Trinity, the forge, the anvil, and the hammer. And honestly, the forge part is where people overthink it. You'll see guys spend $3,000 on a professional gas rig, but back in the day, a blacksmith was just a person who knew how to trap heat in a hole. You can build a JBOD. It's an acronym, just a box of dirt. Literally a wooden box filled with clay and soil with a pipe for airflow. It'll get steel hot enough to forge weld just as well as the fancy stuff.
A box of dirt? That sounds suspiciously low-tech for someone who usually geeks out over his Japanese water stones.
Nature is the best insulator, Alex, but you need air. A hair dryer, an old leaf blower, or if you want to be a purist, a set of hand-cranked bellows. You're just forcing oxygen into that carbon. As for the anvil, man, that's where the soul of the shop lives. Pro tip for the folks listening, do not go buy one of those cast iron ASOs, anvil-shaped objects, at the big box hardware stores. They're made of the same stuff as a frying pan. You hit them with a real hammer, and they just go thud and soak up all your energy. You want something with a face that's been hardened.
I've seen the prices on vintage anvils lately. They're going for the price of a used mid-sized sedan. Is there a starving artist version that doesn't involve a second mortgage?
Absolutely. Look for a hardy log. Or better yet, find a scrapyard and look for a massive chunk of forklift mast or a heavy section of railroad track. It's about mass. You want the weight of the world under your workpiece so that when you strike, the energy goes into the steel, not into the ground. I spent my first 2 years hammering on a piece of an old bridge girder I found in a creek. It wasn't pretty, and it rang like a cathedral bell, which, by the way, will make your ears bleed if you don't wear protection, but it moved the metal.
Okay, so we've got our box of dirt and our bridge girder. Now the hammer. I assume I'm not using the one I use to hang picture frames in the hallway?
Whatever you do, keep your carpenter's hammer in the drawer. Those have thin necks and claws that are meant for prying nails, not absorbing the shock of 1,000 blows against hot iron. They'll snap, and the head will go flying like a disgruntled projectile. You want a machinist hammer or a cross peen?
Cross peen. That's the one that looks like a normal hammer on one side but has a blunt horizontal wedge on the other?
Spot on, that wedge is your best friend. It's like a directional trowel. If you hit the metal with the flat face, it spreads out in all directions. But if you use that peen, it's like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. It pushes the metal lengthwise. It's how you take a squat, chunky bar and grow it into a long, elegant taper.
I've seen that fire scale stuff. It looks like the metal is shedding skin. What's actually happening there?
It's basically instant rust. When you heat steel that high, it reacts with the oxygen and creates this brittle crust. If you're not careful and you hammer that scale into the piece, you're essentially bruising the steel's skin. You'll end up with a finished product that looks like it has a bad case of acne. A real smith keeps a wire brush handy and sweeps the anvil face constantly. It's like keeping your kitchen counter clean while you're rolling out dough.
You mentioned forging techniques earlier. For someone who has never touched a hammer, what are the big three? If you can do these, you're actually blacksmithing moves?
First is Waz drawing out. That's what we just talked about, making a piece longer and thinner. It's the foundation. Second is upsetting, which is the exact opposite. You heat up the end of a bar and bump it against the anvil to make it thicker. It feels counterintuitive, like trying to push a rope, but it's how you get enough material to forge a decorative transition or a bolt head.
And the third?
Asi tapering, taking a square edge and turning it into a point. It's a test of your aim. If your hammer isn't landing flat, you're going to get fish lips, where the outside of the steel moves but the center doesn't, leaving a hollow gap. I remember trying to make my first set of fire pokers. I wanted a nice, sharp, decorative point. Instead, I ended up with something that looked like a very frustrated duck's beak. I spent 3 hours trying to fix a 5-minute mistake.
I remember that poker. You used it to stir the charcoal grill once, and the duck beak actually melted off because you hadn't tempered it right, didn't you?
You have a dangerously good memory. And that brings up the hidden science, heat treatment. Blacksmithing isn't just about moving the metal, it's about changing its molecular personality.
This is the part people love on TV. The big quench, the steam, the fire. It's very dramatic. But what's actually happening in that bucket?
You're freezing the atoms. When the steel is red hot, the carbon atoms are dancing around, all loose and happy. When you dunk it in water or oil, you're slamming the door on them. They get trapped in a crystal structure that makes the steel incredibly hard, but also as brittle as a Christmas ornament. If you dropped a quench blade on the floor, it would shatter like glass.
Which is why you have to temper it, right? To give it its soul back?
Exactly. You gently reheat it to a much lower temperature. You watch the oxide colors, these beautiful iridescent shimmers that crawl across the steel. A light straw color is perfect for a razor's edge. A deep blue is what you want for a spring or a tool that needs to take a beating without snapping. It's the most meditative part of the job. You're literally watching the temper of the metal relax until it's just tough enough to do work, but not so hard that it's fragile.
It sounds like a lot of feel. How does a beginner know when red is hot enough, or when straw color is actually straw and not you stayed in the oven too long?
Magnetism. This is the trick that saved me years of headaches. If you're not sure if you're at the right temperature for the quench, touch a magnet to your steel. When it reaches that critical temperature, the decoalescence point, the steel loses its magnetic pull. It just stops sticking. When the magnet drops off, you know you're ready to dunk. No fancy thermal cameras required, just a 50-cent magnet on a stick.
That is incredibly clever. See, this is why I keep you around.
That, and I'm the only one who can lift the anvil. But look, Alex, the reason people are coming back to this is that it's the ultimate maker skill. If you need a specific tool, a chisel, a punch, a custom wrench, a blacksmith doesn't go to the store. They just make the tool to make the thing. It's the origin of all other crafts.
It feels very empowering. To look at a pile of scrap and see a set of hinges for a barn door or a custom kitchen knife. But what's the one mistake you see every single newcomer make? The one that makes you want to reach through the screen and grab their arm?
Gripping the hammer like it's a drowning man's life raft. Beginners always white-knuckle the handle. Within 20 minutes, their forearm is screaming and they get carpenter's elbow. You have to hold a blacksmithing hammer like you're holding a small bird, firm enough that it won't fly away, but gentle enough that you don't crush it. You let the weight of the hammer do the work. You're just the guide.
Hold it like a bird. I like that. It's much more poetic than your usual hit it until it gives up philosophy.
Well, every now and then a little poetry slips through the cracks. But truly, blacksmithing is about patience. Metal has a memory. If you hit it wrong, it'll tell you about it later in the form of a crack or a warp. You have to listen.
So, for our listeners who are ready to order their first 5-pound bag of coal and find a hardy log in the woods, what's the final word?
Don't wait for the perfect shop. You're never going to have the perfect anvil or the most modern forge. Start where you are. Build a box of dirt. Find a heavy piece of steel. Get something hot and hit it. You'll mess up. You'll burn your favorite shirt. Seriously, don't wear synthetic fabrics. You'll melt like a marshmallow, and you'll probably make a few pretzels that don't look like anything. But the first time you feel that steel move, the first time it yields to your will, you'll feel like you've tapped into a power that's been part of us for 3,000 years.
Just make sure the power doesn't involve melting your eyebrows off, Tiger.
Hey, they grow back eventually.
Thanks for the deep dive, Tiger. Next time I want to talk about forge welding, because I still don't understand how two pieces of solid metal just become one.
Oh, that's just high temperature chemistry mixed with a lot of luck and a very heavy sledgehammer. We'll get into that. But for now, get out there and make some sparks.